Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another light novel review video. This week, we're going to be reviewing Volume 6 of Grimgar. Funny enough, Volume 6 is actually one of my favorite volumes. It starts pretty well off, gets kind of and then halfway through the book, it gets amazing. This book also has a lot of setup for future books, foreshadowing, and really shows you why the volunteer soldiers are very gray in terms of morality, and I really like that. I still do have some gripes for this book, but I'll get to those when I get to them. But like in past videos, I'm going to talk about the plot, the characters, and the themes, and then at the very end of the video, I'll give it a score all the way from A+, all the way down to F. Which, by the way, when I talk about the plot, just know that I'm not going to be able to talk about every single thing that happens, and this is one of the more jam-packed Grimgar books. So just know that I do recommend this book at the end of the day, and I think a lot of people should be on Grimgar, and if you want to actually fully experience the story, you definitely should. If you do decide to buy Volume 6 of Grimgar, please use my affiliate link down in the description and in the comment section if you guys want to get the book. A percentage of that purchase will go to me, and I can actually afford to keep the lights on and feed myself. So I'd appreciate it if you guys do buy the book to go through that link, and it would really be helping me out. But let's begin with Grimgar, Fantasy and Ash, Level 6. Towards a glory not worth taking. The story actually starts with Hadahiro running away from a bunch of giants and cultists, and luring them into a trap with the Tokis and Hadahiro's party. They actually deal with all of them fairly easily. And Hadahiro also tells us that there's been a time skip about a month or so. His party and the Tokis have gotten pretty close. Not that the story really does much to really show that, actually. The only people that really interact with the Tokis a lot is just kind of Hadahiro and Ranta. It's about it, honestly. Well, there's also Shihiru and Inu, but she hates his guts. But essentially, the volunteer soldiers have all started moving into the Dusk Realm now, and it's kind of started destroying everything. Specific clans have gone around just kind of murdering all the cultists and their villages and their families and their kids. So yeah, it's kind of fucked up. However, Hadahiro and his friends are making a huge profit doing this. Now they're making about 3 gold-ish per run to the Dusk Realm. So that's really good. After that section of the story, which is about the first chapter or so, this story does kind of start to teeter out for a little bit for me. Mainly because this is the part of the story where Hadahiro starts to get all, like, sad over the fact that he thinks that Kuzaku and Mary are banging in the back streets of the... I wish I was kidding, but this is solely true. He really thinks that Kuzaku and Mary are dating, and they're just going off at night to go bang. Say what you want about the Grimgar writer. He's right. This is how teenagers think, unfortunately. It still doesn't make it better, and it's kind of annoying, because we all know this is not what's really happening. The story never really fooled me for a second, and it's just kind of a weird love triangle thing that's kind of going on for way too long, and thank God it's going to end in the next book. And eventually, he goes to hang out with some of the Tokis, and it's implied that he's been hanging out with the Tokis here and there, off screen for the last month or so. And these are kind of been really, admittedly kind of uncomfortable things they've been doing to kind of get him to eventually start dating Memran. Basically started out with him and one of the guy Tokis, Anna, and Memran going on walks, going to get drinks, stuff like that. And eventually, in this situation, it was Kikawa who didn't show up, and Hadahiro was stuck going with Anna, who's the worst member of the party. Fuck you, fight me. Which, by the way, watch this video to get more context for the scene, because God, it makes me want to strangle the bitch. He gets to hang out with those two, and Anna gets really wasted drunk, and she starts like just attacking Hadahiro for not dating Memran. Memran starts crying. It's a whole big, very uncomfortable scene that I would assume that the writer's doing specifically to show off just how just weird they are and how messed up they are towards Hadahiro. But they never come back to this. I think this is supposed to be kind of a comedy thing, but it's really uncomfortable. After that, Haru and his party and the Tokis go back to Alterna for a bit to go and get more abilities and new armor, new upgrade. They just go back to upgrade all their stuff, essentially. And one of the lines that actually blew my mind is that the 2 priest characters in the Tokis party, mind you, these are really high-level volunteer soldiers, like significantly stronger than Hadahiro's party. Both of the priest characters, Anna and Tada, decided to finally learn Sacrament. Why did it take you both so fucking long to learn Sacrament? Good God! Hadahiro finally learned Stealth during this time, though, which is Stealth is like one of his main new abilities that he's going to be using for the rest of the story, and it's honestly probably his best ability. They eventually go back to the Dusk Realm and realize that there's a new giant giant monster walking around and this weird Hydra looking thing. They eventually formulate a plan and want to actually ask Soma to join them on a giant hunt for the giant monster and the Hydra. And this is where the story gets really, really, really good. They bump into the second strongest volunteer soldier ever, Akira, who is part of the clan that Harahiro also joined, the Daybreakers, and Akira agrees to join them on the hunt to kill the giant monster god thing. I do want to point out also that Akira in this scene is actually super humble and like a really chill dude, and he continues to be a really chill dude throughout the entire story. He is actually one of the characters that is shown to be like the skill ceiling of the verse. And he is something that Haru could actually become, because Akira got to where he is now because of repetition and actually kind of just learning how the world works through like practice, essentially. He even admits that he started off as cowardly and weaker than Haru. But they eventually meet up with Soma, have dinner with him, and funny enough, this entire scene from when they met Akira to when they meet Soma is actually really interesting, because you can really see how Akira and his party interact with Haru and his party, and how Soma and his party interact with everyone else as well. They're all really distinct and different people, and they treat their leaders vastly differently. Soma is consistently shown to be a bit of an airhead, but he's very likable. And Akira is respected by a lot of people, but his friends like know him really well, and they'll say that he used to be kind of a coward. Like, they just know him, so they don't give him the same air of respect that everyone else does, but they still are shown to be very close. But when they do tell Soma about the plan to take out the giant god thing in the Dusk Realm, Akira and Soma's party actually have this like sit down and conversation where they plan things out after Harahiro suggested they make a trap for the giant god. But when they're done discussing all that, they decide to make giant holes in the floor in the Dusk Realm to lure the monsters into, to hopefully eventually fall into and, you know, break their legs or something. Of course, Haru and his party get chosen to make one of the holes, while Soma and his party keep the monsters away by luring them away, essentially. The next couple chapters are essentially Haru and his party making a hole, dealing with how annoying Ranta is, and dealing with the Tokis acting like Tokis. At some point, they do take a break and start walking around the Dusk Realm, just seeing how everyone else is doing. Eventually, it leads to one of my favorite scenes in the entire light novel. The parties, plus one of Akira's members, who is the young elf boy, check on how the Hydra is doing, essentially being led around by volunteer soldiers to keep them away from the traps so they don't trigger them right away. Tada decides to open his big-ass mouth and yell at the top of his lungs at the Hydra. The story describes him yelling so loud that Harahiro says that he didn't know someone could get that loud. Everyone was actually shocked. Even the Tokis were taken back by this. The Hydra actually started to move towards them. Haru, without any hesitation, put his hands around Tada's neck and collar and dragged him away, screaming at everyone else to run. So they all ran away while Haru was dragging Tada, like, by his neck, which is fucking hilarious. And Tada did not take well to this when they stopped. He started yelling at Harahiro and getting in his face. Haru, while being scared, did not back down and called him out on his incredible lack of foresight. Essentially, Tada just endangered all of them for no reason, just because he has an ego. And Haru basically just tells him off, and Tada actually does back off, implying that if you stand up to Tada, he will back off because he'll respect you for it. But from this point onward, eventually the monsters do attack, and the volunteer soldiers go into a giant war versus the monsters. It's like, I think, a couple hundred volunteer soldiers versus a bunch of monsters, which are Hydra, giants of multiple different sizes, and a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of cultists. One thing that I will mention at this part is that the writer of Grimgar does a really good job of like showing spectacle when it comes to giant fights. A lot of like the best light novels that you're gonna probably talk about with the community is mentioning stuff like Volume 3, Volume 17, Volume 18, like the ones that have really big wars and really big spectacles, because the guy gives a lot of good like descriptions and explains how the fights are going in a really well done way, and it helps really paint this picture in your mind of what's going on. It feels very hectic and terrifying, and Haru and his friends are scrambling around just trying to find like their friends and stay together, and eventually they get in a situation where they're all fighting off some cultists, and the Tokis do something that actually made me feel pretty happy about it. The Tokis come in and help Haru and his friends. They're essentially paying them back for all the help help they've given them for the last couple months. And this is a really interesting moment because Haru essentially takes command again of everyone, and they all listen to him and they all stay alive. And you do get some really weird comments from Anna when she cheers for people because she'll say stuff like, nice butthole.
Okay, but why though?
That's great. Eventually, Akira and Soma both do show up on the battlefield, and by that point, holy crap, do the monsters get destroyed by Akira and his party, and eventually Soma shows up to take out the Hydra very easily and pretty quickly. They really show off in this book, like, just how high level of difference they are from everyone else. It's nuts. However, Haru starts to realize that they're essentially fighting these monsters for no reason. A lot of volunteer soldiers are dying all over the place, and they're not really gonna gain very much from killing all these monsters. As a matter of fact, they're probably losing more than anything else. They could win this fight, but they'll be losing so many people for little to no reason. So Haru actually asks them to help back to Grimgar and keep them all safe. So they all agree and they listen to Harahiro, funny enough, and they make a giant defensive circle around the weaker volunteer soldiers. Eventually, Haru and his friends do get separated, unfortunately, because the giant god shows up and tries to stomp on everyone, and a lot of people are implied to get destroyed and crushed and murdered here. And Haru eventually meets up with the two characters named Nana and Nono, and I fucking hate their names. And to save Harahiro and his party, they eventually lead Haru and his party to another world altogether, just to get them out of the Dusk Realm because they were essentially getting attacked by more cultists, more giants, and if they stayed there any longer, they would have died. But that is where the volume actually ends. Personally, I love this part of the story because this is where it leads into like the giant getting back to Alterna saga. And I really did enjoy this book because shit, there's so much stuff jam-packed in this book. I couldn't even get into all of it. Like, I tried my best. I don't know how long this video is gonna be, but man, there's so much that happens in this book. One of the things I really enjoyed about this book, all the characters in Haru's party do get a lot more moments in this book than they did in the previous book. All those moments might not be fantastic because most of like Mary and Kuzaku's moments are basically just Haru essentially assuming they're banging or dating, and that's about it. Haru and Kuzaku do get pretty cool moments when they are holding off cultists together. Chihiro gets really good moments where she actually like helps fight off monsters with her magic. Mary gets a few moments where she's actually fighting off people without being able to use her own magic to heal people, so she has to use her short staff to actually fight off the cultists, and she's not even meant that much for combat, so she's putting a lot of work in to keep everyone else alive without her magic. Ranta does a lot of dumb Ranta stuff in this book, but at least it's a lot more than a lot of other characters get in their party. Yume doesn't really get that much either, but she does get a little funny moment with Ranta and Haru early on when it comes to talking about butthole. What the fuck's this book like going on about buttholes for some reason? But yeah, there's also another butthole joke that happens early on in the story. And while early in the book, the Tokis were kind of annoying, primarily just Anna, honestly, they eventually do get enough like interesting stuff going on where they're not insufferable compared to like the first book where they showed up, which I got really annoyed with them, honestly. And the themes of this book are actually very simple, and I love the simplicity of this theme because I don't need to think that hard. It is one of two things. Either do not let your ego blind you to what is happening around you, like Tada and his ego challenging the Hydra could have possibly endangered his friends and Haru's friends, or learn to choose your battles wisely and don't fight for things that don't need to be fought for. The reason I say this is that the entire situation happening in the Dusk Realm realistically doesn't need to be happening. The volunteer soldiers are essentially invaders into another world, and they're essentially there to kill off a lot of creatures that don't need to be getting killed just because the volunteer soldiers can essentially profit off their death and the jewelry and the medals that they have. A lot of these volunteer soldiers were doing just fine before they got to this place, and they're just going there to make even more money. And eventually this blows up in their face when the Dusk Realm fights back and almost wipes them out. Haru recognizes in the end of the book that they're essentially fighting for no real reason aside from like their pride in being volunteer soldiers, and I think that either they're pushing because they're prideful of not wanting to lose a fight to these monsters, or they're essentially just blinded to the fact that so many volunteer soldiers are dying that they think that this is just part of life when they could just leave and there's no reason to keep fighting. I actually really enjoyed this book. If it wasn't for the sections of the story where we keep going back to Haru thinking about Mary and Kuzaku, and it's just so annoying. I don't care. No one is buying it. No one gives a shit about this subplot. And honestly, I'm glad it's disappearing in the next book because it's exhausting. Every time it came up, I rolled my eyes. I just didn't care. Well, I really don't like Anna as a character. They kind of just do a whole scene with her in the bar, and that never comes back up. It just played up as a joke, and it doesn't feel funny. It just feels really weird. If it wasn't for those specifically, I probably would give this book like an A+. But because of the negatives I have with this book, I have to give this book ultimately an A-. This is one of the books that I like the most in the series, but it's only because of that halfway point where it starts to get really good. There's a lot of awesome world building, and they expand a lot on the volunteer soldiers and their culture, and they actually expand a little bit on the magic system in this book that I thought was pretty interesting as well. And ultimately, I think the Tokis in this book were used very well compared to the first time they were introduced. They used them just enough where I enjoyed most of their interactions with Haru and his party. But if you've read Volume 6 of Grimgar, let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. Let me know what you guys want me to talk about next. Next week's video is probably going to be another Gun Gale Online alternative video, or a video talking about some stuff that I've asked you guys in my community section over on YouTube. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen my post, me asking you guys what you guys want me to talk about, definitely leave your comments on that post. I might make another one asking you guys for more things you want me to talk about in small shorts. I'm probably going to take some of those shorts and make them into bigger videos, because some people have actually asked me to talk more about Barbara. Before I end this video, I'd like to say a special thank you to all of our subscribers over on our Twitch. Subscribe to my Twitch, or use the thanks feature here on YouTube to donate to me directly for a chance to get a shout out at the end of our video. Again, thank you to my Twitch subs. You guys are awesome. You guys help me pay for my bills and feed my dog. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day.